I'd like to start with thanking specifically Mr. Brunt for being so instrumental in arranging today, sending out all the invites. I don't know whether you came voluntarily or whether he threatened you, but there you are, so thank you very much, and thank you to Spinnies for sponsoring today's event and arranging some lunch for us afterwards. And then also on behalf of the Business School of Stellenbosch, I'd like to thank them as well. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Steyn. I'm an alumnus at the Business School of Stellenbosch. I've spent altogether about 17 years studying at that institution with my BA, my honours, my masters, my doctorate, everything at Stellenbosch. So I'm what you call a loyal alumnus of Stellenbosch. And I've also been facilitating at the business school for almost 10 years now. And it's with their help that I'm here today, and also with the help of Spinnies that we've become involved in Dubai in some of the teaching and training programs that we run here. So to those institutions and to Mr. Brunt, thank you very much. The way in which we are going to do this is I've been given about 30 minutes, 45 minutes to talk to you about making the correct strategic decisions during volatile and dynamic environmental challenges that we face. I'll probably take about 30 minutes to complete the talk, and then give you about 15 minutes maybe to ask some questions, and then afterwards they'll treat us to something nice from the kitchen. I've been here now, this is my third day that I've been in this venue, and I've had the privilege of being served lunch twice here so far, and it's really magnificent, but that you probably know already. So I've also, just for those of you who might be interested, after completing my studies, I published the findings of the research. I published it in a book. Most of you who attended the training program from Spinnies last year, they all bought a book like this, and I also had some delegates yesterday that acquired the book. So for those of you who are interested, we are negotiating with a wholesale distributor at the moment in Dubai to make the book available in Dubai through bookstores. But as of yet, it's not in the bookstores, so I have asked the wholesaler whether I can have the permission where I do the talks to sell the book out of hand, and they have said that's fine. I am also allowed to discount slightly. The book will retail for 120 in the stores, and I'm allowed to sell it here for 100. For those of you who are interested afterwards, you can just ask my associate Mirinda, she will take care of that. For those of you who would like to do some additional reading. However, I'm not here to sell the book. I'm here to talk to you about making the correct strategic decisions. I wonder, do you think we should switch that light off? Is it going to bother you if maybe the slide will show up a bit better this one here? No? Better? Better? Oh, let's not go totally dark. And maybe the middle one, if you don't mind. The middle one. There we go. Better? But better. Alright. Okay. In talking to you about making the correct strategic decisions, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do it on the basis of 4 themes which really captures or encapsulates strategic thinking or the strategic planning process. And those themes would be environmental scanning, scenario planning, strategy selection, and then ultimately business performance. In a way, if you look at business performance is more the outcome of those preceding activities. The activities are to scan the environment and do scenario planning and strategy selection are very much sequential activities, but business performance itself isn't really an activity, it's more the outcome of those preceding activities. Now, why do we choose these activities to talk about making the correct strategic decisions? Well, you have to start somewhere. It's always a good place to start by scanning the environment for purposes of gathering information. For any sort of decision making, I need to have a basket, or as we call it, a compound of information from which I can then extract information and craft certain scenarios or possible futures, if you like. And then on the basis of those scenarios having a possibility of materializing, I'll make a certain strategic selection. So So a strategy isn't necessarily something that's going to fall out of the sky or some master plan that you think up in a creative sense. It's very much more a scientific activity of taking the information to your disposal, looking at possible futures, and making a calculated decision in terms of which of those scenarios are more likely to pan out. And then, depending on how accurate or appropriate your selection is, you have a certain impact on business performance. And that impact can either be positive or negative. Now, in talking to you about making correct strategic decisions today, I'm going to focus specifically on two of these four elements. The one is going to be on the environmental scanning, and the other one is on strategy selection itself. I would hate to come here today and just tell you what you know already. So I'm not just going to say to you, well, this is what we do, we scan, we plan, we make a decision, because that I assume you know already. Whether you're in the corporate offices of Spinneys or whether you're in the store, you do it on a daily basis. You get the information, what do we have, what do we not have, what should we order, what should we not order, what do we think the trend is going to be for the weekend, are we going to have more sales, less sales, and on the basis of that you take a decision. So I'm not here to simplify that sort of activity, that you know already. I'm rather here to challenge you on what you know. And rather here to challenge you on the conventional methodologies that you use when it comes to strategy. So the first thing I'm really going to pull apart is PESTEL. Most of us are familiar with PESTEL. It's an acronym that we use when we scan the environment, looking at politics, economy, technology, legislation, green environment. I'm going to pull that apart a little bit and ask critical questions around that to get you to think a little bit differently about it. And in the process, I'll introduce you to what we call the P-square framework. And then the second pillar I'm going to interrogate today is the one of decision making. How do we make the correct decisions? Do we have some sort of a tool, some sort of magnifying glass or a crystal ball that I can look into that can help me to make the correct strategic decisions? So the first part very much about PESTEL. Now, what I like to do when I start these sort of presentations is to just give you a little bit of background of where my interest in dynamic environments came from. And it very much originated from a time that I spent in Sudan. I worked in Khartoum, in northern Sudan, for a period of about 2 years, about 5 years ago. I was the CEO for a multinational organization in Sudan and was tasked to grow an organization. And for a country, most of you know that Sudan is in a kind of a state of civil war, one might say. It's also a country that's under sanction. And there I found it incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging to remain competitive, to manage my people, to remain sustainable. It was tremendous challenges that I faced during that time, and that led me to question the conventional methodologies that we use in business, because by and large most of them didn't work. What further motivated my study is when I told people the story of Sudan, they would all say, yes, but that's very extreme. It's a very extreme example, you know. Here with us, it's not like that. Well, maybe that's partially true. It's not entirely true. I've had the privilege of doing a 7-year research project subsequent to my work in Sudan with the University of Steyn, where we investigated 121 different organizations, specifically looking at how they scan, how they plan, and how they make strategic selections. And we came to the conclusion that by and large, most organizations in the 21st century are challenged with dynamism in the environment. So whether it's Sudan, whether it's Africa, whether it's Dubai, whether it's London, most organizations are facing the same challenge, and that is that the environment, the pace and the intensity of the environment in terms of its change has picked up tremendously, making it very difficult for us to plan because the environment is no longer stable. It's not as predictable as what we would like it to be. So the question, of course, is what to do about this dynamism in the environment. How do I go about to plan? Most organizations still use what we call a scanning framework. That framework will look something like this. This is a generic example. There are others, but by and large they look something like this. So at some particular point in time, whilst you're doing your strategic planning, somebody will draw a picture on the board that looks like this, and they will point to the organization that's normally central to that environment, and they will refer to the market or the competitive environmental sphere, and they will refer to the PESTEL or the larger macro environmental sphere. Nothing really wrong with that, except if you look at the type of thinking that sits behind a framework like this, it's very much what we call reductionist in nature, i.e., I reduce things, I break it into smaller manageable bits. So I take the environment and I segment it, I categorize it, and I say that this is the competitive environment and it consists of buyers, suppliers, potential new entrants, substitute products. And out there, this is the pestle, the larger macro environment, and it consists of politics, economies, etc. And yes, it does. But what we're questioning is, can you really segment and categorize the environment? Because strictly speaking, according to theory, when you segment and categorize, you do that with stable, ordered, simple things. The minute you have an element of dynamism, you're actually applying the incorrect thinking approach by categorizing and segmenting. That's the first observation that we've made. So we're looking at this framework and say, but okay, we use this to scan the environment, and then we're asking the critical question, and that is that, does the environment really look like this? Is this a true, an accurate, an appropriate reflection of the environment? Why do we ask that question? Well, we ask that question because we made this revelation through the research. Ever since the first research was done on the correlation between scanning and business performance, by and large, this is what we found. Now, this graph indicates to you, it's a simplified version, but more or less, the more I scan, the higher the probability of increased business performance. By and large, it's been the case for decades, ever since the first research recorded in the 1970s. Of late, however, during the past 7 years, we've discovered this, which is of grave concern. Companies are still scanning, and they're scanning more. But the positive correlation between business performance and scanning are regressing into a negative one. And then, of course, the question is, but why? What happened from there to there? Well, what has happened is the environment has changed. The environment does no longer look like that. The environment's not stable. It's not ordered. So the thinking approach that you had previously in a stable state has sort of come to the end of its shelf life. And that, by and large, is leading to this. Now, the question, of course, what do I do now? Because all of a sudden I'm faced with an environment that looks like this. Random in its change, fast, unpredictable, extreme, dysfunctional, dynamic. The current CEO of General Electric, Jeff Immelt, has got a beautiful description. He talks about sweeping randomness in the environment. But why do we say that? What do I now have to do? Why do I need to look at if the environment is no longer stable? Because remember, if scanning is the starting point of my strategic planning process, that picture that I use to scan the environment with needs to be as complete, as real as possible. Because as long as I draw the environment as if it is still stable, I'm going to think about the environment as stable. So it's really, in essence, my sense of planning and thinking that I'm challenging. So this is the question. Whether pestle is still adequate, appropriate, whether we still can categorize the environment or not. Because more and more what we find, once again all based on the research, is this so-called mechanistic or reductionist or non-systemic or analytical, call it what you like, way of thinking about the strategic challenges that we have, that's become redundant. And it's shown in the research where we have a regression in terms of the correlation between business performance and scanning. Okay, I'm sure you are as tired as what I am about everybody telling you how messed up the environment is. Somewhere we have to start looking at, okay, what do we do, Steyn? How does this help us? So far you've just been telling us what we already know. You've just been using different pictures and different words. Okay, let's move into this volatile, dynamic environment. One of the first observations we've made that helped us is that the conventional way of scanning the environment would very much take the environment and break it into systems.